Okay, everybody, we're going to start. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the fourth day of Ethics Awareness Week. There's still the rest of today and tomorrow, so if you feel like you want to come to more sessions, that would be great. My name's Nicole Ortega, and I'm a faculty fellow inside of the center, the Ethics Center. And I am here to introduce today's session, one of the sessions, and it's right up there, Equitable Access to Higher Education, Perspectives from Students with Disabilities. And before I introduce Dr. Carlson, I do want to say thank you for being here and for joining us in this important session. Dr. Carlson is a licensed psychologist and board-certified behavioral analyst with more than 35 years of experience working with children and adults with autism and other developmental disabilities. Dr. Carlson began her career as a special education teacher and received her PhD in clinical psychology from SUNY Stony Brook under the mentorship of Dr. Edward Carr. Dr. Carlson has held leadership roles at a number of programs serving individuals with ASD, including the Groden Center in Rhode Island and the May Institute in Massachusetts. She served as an expert panelist on the National Standards Project, a review of evidence-based practices in the treatment of autism. She served as education director of the Autism Center at Virginia Commonwealth University and as assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry. She has directed the Autism Inclusion Project at the Developmental Disabilities Institution in Smithtown, New York, providing technical assistance and training to public schools to build capacity to serve students with ASD. Dr. Carlson has mentored graduate students and served as adjunct faculty at Fitchburg State College, Northeastern University, Salve Regina, I hope I said that right? Salve Regina University, and the University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth. Dr. Carlson is currently assistant professor in the School of Education at UVU, where she directs the Melisa Nellesen Center for Autism, coordinates the MED in Applied Behavioral Analysis, and teaches in the Autism Studies program. Dr. Carlson has presented her work at national and international conferences, and her publications have been translated for international audiences. So if you will please give a warm welcome to Dr. Carlson.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. I always get weirdly embarrassed when people read my bio. And how many students are here? Raise your hand if you're a student. Awesome. So basically, when your bio gets that long, it just means you've been doing it for a really long time. So you will get there soon. Well, not soon. In a while. It'll happen. Okay, so today we're going to talk about, I have to remember to stand next to the mic too. I like to move around a lot, so this is going to be my biggest challenge today. So we're going to talk about equitable access to higher education. So do we have any education majors in the audience? All right. So we've got some folks in education. So some of this you might already know if you're an education student. So let me just quickly, I'm going to give our panel some time to introduce themselves before we start the questions. But we've got Lori Bowen here, who is the Associate Director of the Melisa Nellesen Center for Autism and coordinates all of our community outreach and student programs. We have Caleb Doc Clegg, who is a student here at UVU and also our student worker at the center, and we could not function without him. We have Robert Ryan in the middle, also a student here. Reen, sorry. Okay, I made my first mistake. And at the end, we have Aaron Letman, who is a student who will be actually graduating in December from UVU. Okay, so I want to start with UVU's mission statement. So I know they make you commit this to memory when you get enrolled here. So if you haven't committed it to memory, I just want to point out that in our mission statement, it very clearly says that we educate every student. Every student. Okay, so here's the ad. So here's the Melisa Nellesen Center for Autism. So if you're not familiar with what we do here, our building was built completely with donations from the local community. So we have a very community-facing mission. But we also offer training and supports for professionals who are working in the field. We offer programs for autistic students here at UVU to help them be successful in their college career. And we do a lot of community events and activities to basically improve the quality of life for autistic individuals and their families in our community. So let's talk about higher education. So in 1965, Congress passed, this is the democracy part of this, by the way, if you're wondering. Congress passed the initial Higher Education Opportunity Act. I was in kindergarten when this happened. And the purpose of the Higher Education Opportunity Act was to strengthen the educational resources of colleges and universities to provide financial assistance to students in post-secondary and higher education. So the first Higher Education Opportunity Act was really designed to create broader access to higher education for all folks who live in the country. And it was really to address the concern of meritocracy in our society, so that only the most wealthy could go to college. So this is what created that FAFSA process that all of us are so enamored of, right? Who doesn't love to fill out a good FAFSA form? But it created all of those major student aid programs. And it was really focused on making post-secondary education more affordable and accessible to all of the citizens in the United States. All the citizens except individuals with disabilities. So it wasn't until the next year, 1966, when Congress passed the Elementary and Secondary Education Act amendments. And in these amendments, this was the first federal legislation that allowed for local level school districts to develop programs to serve students with disabilities in K-12 schools. Prior to that, most students with disabilities were served either in state-operated facilities or institutions. So students just with disabilities didn't exist even in our K-12 system in the 60s. And in the neighborhood where I grew up, I had a neighbor who had a developmental disability, and he never went to school. He's the same age as me now. He's 62, and I go back to the old neighborhood. I still see him around. Yeah, he never went to school. He didn't have the opportunity back then. This act also established the Bureau of Education of the Handicapped. That's an old term that they used to use in the 60s. And the National Advisory Council, which we now call the National Council on Disability. In the mid-70s, Public Law 94-142, which those of you who are education majors might be familiar with, is called the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. So this moved from, we will allow you to access grants to allow K-12 education for students with disabilities, to every school, every child with a disability must have access to public school. Again, limited to K-12. And for students with disabilities, that K-12 age range was a little bit broader, so it was 3 to 21, but it was still considered part of the K-12 system. So even though this addressed up to age 21, there was no requirement that higher education institutions provide any services or supports for students with disabilities. IEPs, so the individualized education plans that are available for students with disabilities in K-12 education now, still don't extend to post-secondary education, even if a student is under 21. So it wasn't until 2008, so this is pretty recent history, right, that there was any legislation in our country to provide provisions for students with disabilities to access higher education. So that's pretty shocking, right? That it was just in 2008. And the provisions were to help students with disabilities access, participate, and succeed. So that was actually wording in the bill. So not just hanging out in college, but success in college. And it opened federal student financial aid programs to students with intellectual disability. So prior to that, if students with disabilities certain disability categories wanted to come to higher education, they had no access to financial aid. So in 2008, it opened up Pell Grants, work study, and federal supplemental education opportunity grants. So it's still more limited than for an otherwise typically developing college student, but there are more programs accessible. It also provided for a bunch of things. One of the things that it created was an opportunity for funding to post-secondary education organizations to provide better service. It created a grant program that we are actually recipients of here at VCU. That's the TIPSID grant program, which allows specialized program development for students with intellectual disability. And we have a TIPSID program here on campus called Wolverines Elevated. And that's a brand new program. So it wasn't until 2008 that we really saw more equity in terms of what it takes to really access higher education and be successful. It included things like accessible instructional materials. So again, prior to that, there wasn't federal legislation that guaranteed students would have accessible instructional materials. And we sort of take that for granted now, but again, it's relatively recent that development happened. Okay, so let's look at some statistics for students with disabilities. So I have a couple of tables here that I'm just going to go through quickly. So this first one is about young adults with disabilities in post-secondary education. So this is about participation. So if you look at students in all disability categories, only about 54.9% of students with any disability attend college or post-secondary ed of any kind. That includes vocational technical college. If you look at the numbers specifically for students with autism, it's 36% of students with autism who attend any kind of post-secondary education. And for students with intellectual disability, that number is even lower. It's 27.6% who attend any post-secondary education, including vocational technical education. Here's where things get a little more bleak. So these are completion rates. So this is based on the percentage of students that enroll in post-secondary education who actually completes. And for students in all disability categories of students who enroll in post-secondary education, only 38.4% are completing a degree or certificate of any kind. In intellectual disability, it's 40% of those students who enroll, who complete. And if you look at autistic students, it's 14% of autistic students who begin a post-secondary program who complete. So we're falling short on that success measure for students because we still have a very significant portion of students who are not completing. So here's those stats in plain English. So if we look at typical college students, for every 100 college students who attend a public university, 63 will complete a program. So that's not bad. For students with a disability, 21 of those 100 students with a disability will complete a program of any kind. 100 students with autism enrolling in post-secondary education, only 5 will program. And for students with intellectual disability, for 100 students with intellectual disability who enrolled, 11 will complete a program. So it always makes me a little sad to look at these numbers. They're not great. So we're falling short when it comes to helping these students really succeed. The good news is post-secondary options are growing and increasing. Related to those TIPSID programs that I was talking about, so we have TIPSID and IPSID programs that are specifically programs for students with intellectual disability, and we've seen a tremendous growth of programs for students with autism across the country. So here's just a map of the country with TIPSID, IPSID programs, and you'll still see that the numbers aren't great, but every state but one, we're not sure what's going on in Wyoming, but every state but one has at least one program, one college program now, specifically for students with intellectual disability. The darker the color blue, the more programs the states have. And you can see, well, you probably can't see because it's small, but in Utah, 2 years ago we had one program. Last year we started Wolverines Elevated with our TIPSID grant, and this year we started another Aggies Elevated program at USU Eastern. So we have tripled the number of programs available in this state just in the last 2 years with the help of that TIPSID program funding. For students with autism, they didn't give a nice number map like the TIPSID folks, but this is a search engine that's available on the College Autism Network where you can search autism-specific programs by state or by support service programs. So pretty much every state in the United States now has at least one college or university that has specialized supports for autistic students. And that number is growing. So there is a lot more access. One of the challenges still, though, is those programs often take a very limited number of students. So if you look at the number of students who have access to these sorts of specialized support programs, it's still very low compared to the number of students attending college. So we're going to have a little bit of a discussion today with some of our students who are succeeding in college and getting ready to complete their degrees in some cases. So I'm going to start by having each of our students introduce themselves to you, and then we will move to our panel discussion, and I'll ask them some questions, and we'll learn from them. So Doc, let's start with you.
Hello, my name's Doc. I'm 21 years old, and my major is information technology, and a lot of people tend to ask me when I'm going to graduate. I'm going to be honest, I don't like to pick a date because I don't want to pressure myself into having to commit to that date, because things happen and you may not actually reach that date. But that's not a bad thing. That's just taking it all one step at a time.
I'm Robert Rain, and I'm a UVU student here at the university. I have currently 2 semesters left, and I'm majoring in psychology.
My name's Aaron Letman. I'm 24. I'm studying university studies. I'm expected to graduate this December. And no, I don't know what I'm doing yet.
Yesterday we were practicing for this panel discussion, and one thing we realized as we were talking is that everyone represented here is in that 14%.
Mm-hmm.
So we're listening to people that are being successful with that. So it's very exciting to hear from those that are able to do something amazing.
Okay, so our first question for the panel, I want you all to think back to when you were in high school, and what was the message that you got from teachers and other students about going to college, about the possibility of going to college for you? And I'll give you a little bit of clarification. One of the things that we know is associated with enrolling in college is somebody believing that you can do it. So sort of who was that person for you? Was it somebody in your school who encouraged you? Did you get a positive message about college from school? Was it your family group? What really was it that encouraged you to pursue post-secondary education? And let's start with Robert.
Thank you. I think when I was back in high school, when I was about to graduate from high school, college was, in my teacher's eyes, it was just not an option, because at that point, I didn't know that I would be diagnosed with autism. But my father, who attended Brigham Young University and later University of New Mexico, he really pushed me to look outside of myself and to strive for something greater and something that I thought I could do and was within reach for. But basically, I think it's my dad, because he attended 2 marvelous universities. I think he was the one that really got the fire burning under myself. But yeah, it was just my parents were really, really successful, and I wanted to be like my parents and go to college and get a degree. I graduated from San Juan Community College in Farmington, New Mexico, some years ago, about 2008, with a degree in HR. But it was just, I had lovely parents who saw me through.
All right, great. Aaron, how about you?
Well, where can I begin? All I could say is that guess what I knew early on that college was never the option, but there are those around me, my peers, my classmates, my friends, teachers, and my parents. They all saw potential in one another. I mean, in my family, I'm the youngest, so pretty much everybody else in my family are lawyers from who practice law back in Florida. So as I was about to graduate high school, going through the ACT 4 times, and I came to learn that college might be the best option. I mean, for me, while I'm under the spectrum, it's always it in many countless backgrounds. It was a challenge. I don't know. Well, early on, I came across the accessibilities department, which is the best source because obviously there's no such thing as IEPs in college. But if you get in touch with the accessibilities, they give you the support you need. Well, for my support, I was given to take tests at take longer tests, take them in separate rooms, whatever needs there is. Well, when it comes to applying, I didn't have a FAFSA or scholarship. I just lived on my daddy's money. Yeah.
Thanks, Dad.
Well, if he's listening, I'm sure he's either laughing off. Well,
All right, thanks, Aaron.
As I look through it, 6 years, 5 summer semesters is all I had to do.
All right,
Great.
and as I said at the
Thank you,
beginning,
Jen.
Aaron will be graduating at the end of this semester. So he's one of our fantastic success stories. Doc?
For me, my motivator was always technology. If there's a problem, I try to fix it, whether I've been asked to, because when it comes to technology, I just have a knack for it, but I've always just had that instinct to try to help where I can. And college kind of seemed like the best path to find things to help fix and to really learn how to fix them better. Was my biggest influence on coming to college.
All right, thank you. So, one of the things that around planning for college that their otherwise typically developing peers are included in, they're just left out of it. And many students, when they inquire, are told that that's not for them, that they should consider something else. So there's still a lot of stereotypes in the public education system about opportunities for students and their ability to succeed in a post-secondary environment. And all of our students, I think had different motivations, family support, that personal drive to want to achieve something, or somebody who was saying, yes, this is something that you can do and you should strive for. Tell us about your perspective on having a disability while attending a university. So, Aaron, let's start with you on this one.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes, tell us about your perspective on being a college student with a disability.
I took it was challenging for me at first, but over time I learned to embrace it, embrace my backgrounds. For me, it's always a challenge. At once I never spoke well. Everything I say gets lost in translation in times of excitement, good and bad. And whenever I had to fail a class, I had to retake. Otherwise, dropping out was the only outcome I'm trying to fight. And what else? I had to relearn everything the best I could, buy the textbooks again, and spend countless of hours with my face in the books, doing what I could, learn what I can, pass the classes, spend some time later. Although whenever I do end up flunking a class, I get the grief from my dad saying, "Son, you're not taking school seriously. You gotta change that." Then when the pandemic hit, then when COVID hit, things kind of shifted south. Well, everything went back online, and we had to do live streaming class 24/7. 24/7. And after a year, a path went by. We kind of get back to our roots. We change majors. We change habits. And with me, I've experienced some easy and hard along the way in million circumstances. Well, change was the only thing I had to learn in lots of things. The big thing, change. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Doc?
With being on the spectrum and also having ADHD, I like to looking at it differently with like everyone a different operating system for me. I'm not less than anyone else, but I'm just different, and I've had to approach my classes differently. Where some people, they can read an entirely boring textbook and just be fine, where I might read the first page 5 times because I got distracted twice. But it's all about finding what you can use to be successful, finding strategies that help you. Like for me, when COVID hit, when class all went online, most people, at least with autism, at least my friends, they were kind of upset with it. I was like, hey, I can go at my own pace, whether I want to go fast or slow. It's just finding your own technique.
All right, thanks, Doc. Robert?
Learning to come to college on the autism spectrum has been very difficult for me, mostly because I feel like I'm being kind of singled out by my other students and other people because they know that I do have a disability, and so I'm having to work with professors on more on the Office of Accessibilities. Really helps to make sure that I get a good education by using things like extra time on test and test taking. I've learned how to take tests individually. I've learned how to just cope with life's difficulties. Temple Grandin, who's one of my absolute favorite professors, who I've never taken from, but she said something that's always stuck with me in my post-secondary education. And she says, oftentimes in special education, we look more on deficits rather than on strengths. And I thought, man, why is that so true? And it's, ever since I started at UVU, that's always kind of stuck in my heart, is that a lot of people look at autism as being a disability, but more so it's an ability. It's the ability to go forward, it's the ability to change, but it helps us to, just as she says, that the deficits need to start coming together as strengths.
Thank you all very much. Lori, do you have anything to add?
I've been thinking about all of these students up here and their route they've taken, and sometimes it has been more difficult in certain classes and things. And one thing I think that has been consistent with all of them is perseverance and the ability to work through those struggles that happen to all of us, right? But sometimes they're more intensified, and just that intentional desire to keep going, that internal drive, that even if it's going to take me 5 more times reading that page, then maybe someone else, I'm going to keep doing it. So it's just amazing to look at that success.
Okay, now we're going to get a little more specific to UVU. So tell us about your educational experience at UVU, and particularly, what's been hard? What are the challenges that you faced? What are things that you've thought have gone really well? And then are there specific resources available that you've used that have really helped you, and any barriers related to accessing those things? Aaron, you want to start?
Well, where can I begin? My first semester, when I started taking my generals, I had to take my studies to different places: the library, my apartment, math lab, English lab, anywhere I go, whatever people recommend. And then I thought each time I do the work, I thought I'd be spending the whole day on it. There are times I wanted to take breaks. But when we get to each time we get to midterms or finals, stressful weeks of the semester, no lie. It's been hard to get just to stay in one thing and focused all the way. And it helps if I just get gotten help from classmates or from different tutors, or just at least get some broad insights from my professors. Anywhere I go, oh, the burden stays with me. If I have any advice for everybody else here, all our audience from home seeing this, I'd say take whatever help you could. It might worth the money you spend. And thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Robert?
Let's see, where do I start? What's made it difficult to be in college as an autistic student is just not knowing what my peers will think of me with my disability. One thing that's hard about having a disability and being a student, especially going through school kind of on your own accord, having to pay for classes, is to struggle. And I think that's one of my favorite friends. A couple months ago, I was doing a research project, and she said something to the extent of, I said, well, I feel like it's hard. Classes are hard. I can't do this. I can't do that. And then she looks at me and she goes, okay, just let you struggle for 2 weeks. And I'm like, okay. So then I let that struggle kind of happen, and out of that situation just came, like, I was a gold nugget. Like, I just had to struggle for a bit to know that I had to learn to keep my bearing up. And with the climbing, I knew I had to get crack by crack, up and up and up. But it was just that little sense of advice that she gave, just who says, let yourself struggle for 2 weeks and then you'll be fine.
Yeah, and I think most of you, our students out here, can relate to that, right? There are going to be periods where it's just going to be really hard. And how do you get yourself in that framework, or what support helps you move through that? Thank you, Robert. That was a good insight. Doc?
My experience at UVU, I like to look at it as I came from a high school that had maybe 500 people total in the entirety of the high school, to UVU, which you're lucky if you have a minimum of 500 people in a building. But my experience with UVU is, it's had its ups and downs, but it's just getting to know the people. Because one thing I have liked about UVU is that people don't seem to judge you as much as I thought they would. And also, when it comes to resources, the Melisa Nellesen Center for Autism has quite a few that I've enjoyed when I first started coming to UVU.
Thanks, Doc. So our next question is about sort of that transition to college. So coming to a university setting is a very big transition for all students who come. So how has your perspective changed since you've been at college? What have you learned about yourself? What have you learned about independent adulthood? And Robert, let's start with you on this one.
Oh man, Jane, you are just one nugget. Since I first took my first step at UVU, I thought, man, this is a university, and a lot of people always commented on me. They would say, Robert, you're just going to a very, quote, liberal school, and they just try to brainwash you, and they try to make you liberal and think critically. And so at that aspect, my dad was like, it's all true, isn't it? At least that's what I hear. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to just take a big step and just start in at UVU. And then he goes, trust me, in 4 years, you'll be more liberal than you ever thought you would. And so I love this university, whether it's the Autism Center or the Passages Program. Students who are just really caring for you all semester it just made sense for me that at first when I came here, I was like, university, are you joking me? Can I do this? Because like I'd been on the scope of community colleges all over the country, but when I first stepped at UVU, I was like, well, I guess this is the real deal. Like, I just have to buckle down and see what it's like. But I love this university. It is truly, it's my home away from home.
All right, thanks, Robert. Doc?
Like I was saying earlier, it's on the fact that I came from a really small school that when I came here, my first semester, I took a break and just decided to wander campus to get used to it because there's just so many people here. I was trying to get used to the layout, but then, all this construction happened and COVID, and it kind of destroyed that. But besides that, it was pretty successful, but I've just learned that you view that everyone tries to help each other more often than I was really expecting with my experience. 'Cause I was kind of expecting that it would just be me against the entire university, which I wouldn't call it just me against the entire university anymore. I would call it me and some people against the entire university.
Right, thanks, Doc. Aaron?
Prior to my time at the university, I had every day embracing milestones. Like all of you, you had a lot of things to overcome, a lot of things to embrace. But for me, changes things changes over time when you age or when you come to an adult. Well, you start you feel self-doubt about your image. You feel right? You feel left out. You do what you could, make better friends, and make you feel like you're part of the crew. Well, me, what do you describe life as? For me, either a good book, good movie, a good song you listen to on the radio on your way home from work, whatever it is. You find yourself smiling as time flies because you feel happy with where you are today, whether in school, whether when you're getting married, or when you have kids. You live well until you retire, wherever you are. Some things changes from either bad to good, from small to big. You find yourself in a position that you feel like every decision you've made is worth it.
Great, thanks, Aaron. Right, so for our next question, I'd like you to give us some of your reflections on a very important topic in university life, which is developing social relationships. So yes, we're all here to study, but one of the things that happens at college is we develop a lot of social relationships. So what has that been like for you? And just to add a little bit to the question, is it different than what you experienced when you were maybe in high school or other school experiences that you had? And Doc, can we start with you on this one?
Sure. My social experiences with people at the university are very different from high school because I went to a high school where we've all been with each other for the last 4 years. So, I pretty much knew everyone at my high school for the most part. So when coming here, knowing no one, it was a different experience. I didn't know how people were going to react. I didn't know how necessarily to react with them. I don't always understand if they were joking with me or if they're serious. It's just a different ballpark, different rules, and not all the rules are in English. Most of the time they come from IKEA furniture, to be honest, sometimes I think.
Right, thanks, Doc. Aaron?
Well, yes and no. I could say you find yourself you've put yourself in a spectacle where you know people, they don't know you, but no matter how different you are, it takes time to get to know the real you. Whether you study together, you hang out together, you be together no matter where you go. When you find your life, no matter what religion you follow, whether you're Mormon, you're to be a social, find better companions for life. But in truth, you're here to study, make friends, be social. We all do whatever we could to be to find something, make ourselves whole. It's you can strive your aura for something. In fact, you find you struggle with time management as long as you hope you succeed along the way in many things you can't imagine. You just don't know it yet.
Thank you. Robert?
For me, social relationships, when I first started at the university a number of years ago, I was like, no one knew me. I didn't know anybody else. But as I started to get myself a little bit more relaxed with relationships, I seemed to make friends and to make lasting relationships. I think through my church and through different people that I met at the university, I would have to admit that I made a lot of friends. I remember 2 semesters ago, I took anatomy, and that class was hard as can be for one of my sciences. And that class was great because I could go to class and learn, but it got to the point like second, third weekend, like the student population in my class was exceptional. And I would just, during anatomy, my professor would look at me and we'd be cracking jokes behind his back, and he would be like, students, you need to concentrate. And we'd be like, we're just ready to have fun and poke jokes. And so from week 2 and 3 in, like, I love to go to class. Like, my parents would say, what are you looking forward to? I'm like, I would love to go to anatomy today, and it's going to be a lot of fun because I can crack jokes and do whatever I want to. But social relationships were really something that I had as a goal when I first started, was to get to know 1 or 2 new people every day. And by a month out, you had 6 to 10 friends.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Robert. Okay. So now we're going to talk about maybe some things that have been difficult for you, but we're going to frame it this way. What would have made college better for you? And Robert, I'd like to start with you on this one. What would have made college better for you?
Oh, let's see. What would make college a little bit better for me is when I first started, I was not aware of opportunities for success on campus, namely like the math lab and the writing center. But as I started to go to college, had I known first and foremost what resources were available to me, I think that I would have succeeded in the very beginning instead of, I feel bad about saying this, but I think I'm almost done. I have 2 more semesters left, and I'm still learning what resources are out there. I'm like, had I known all along what was available to me, I think that it would have made me more self-conscious of the fact that I needed to use the math labs or the library to do all my research and my studying. But I think just knowing beforehand what was available to me, that would have made a world of difference.
All right, thanks. Doc?
What would have been made easier for me personally is the fact of, like, there's resources and accommodations like the writing lab, but for me, I'm not the most comfortable going to the writing lab and actually talking to people there. So it's like, I want help, but it's not necessarily the help that's actually going to help me if I'm more stressed out about trying to talk to them about my paper than the actual paper. It's finding the resources that work for you, not just the ones that they have available for you.
All right, thanks. Aaron?
Pretty much the same response, pretty much from Robert and Kayla. But if you ask me, it gets a little awkward and uncomfortable with how I'm dealing with this. How I'm dealing with this, actually. What made college for me is what made if I always have an excuse, a good excuse for not only that I can thrive. And now I'm feeling a bit awkward right now. Just as I'm talking with somebody, I can't make eye contact, and now I can't. It's a line straight toward my face.
Sure. Thanks.
Hey, Erin, that was hard. So thanks for sharing something that's hard. I guess, as you were all talking, one question I have for you, just to kind of go along with what you're saying, is sometimes it's hard to ask for help, right? But sometimes if you get access to the right resource at the right time, it can make every difference. So all of you kind of described different components of what was useful and also some things that were difficult. Like Doc, you mentioned, okay, it's really, like I'm not going to get help if I have to see someone's go face to face with them or
Going back
have those
to that,
conversations. Just a second, I'll let you answer my question. Is that okay? It's
John,
gonna.
It'll take a second.
And then with Robert, you're trying to figure out what the resources are, right? And then Erin, you're talking about that, how that's hard. So how can the university do a better job of meeting those needs for you? Like, what would have made the difference with that?
Well, first, I just say that neither of us have any experience on stage much, so we clearly don't have what it takes.
No, you do. You're doing great. I think you're charming everyone. You're doing great. But do you know what I'm asking? Does anyone want to take that on?
Sure. I think just asking us more on what resource or what would help, because a lot of it is here's what it is, this is what you can do with it, but it's not on what can we do to help you, what resources can we do better on. Like, I know, going back to my writing lab, is that there's online ones which I might look into. Probably not. I'm done with my English classes, to be honest, but it's looking at ways to access those resources in a way that you're comfortable with, is asking people and them asking you, what can we do to help make this resource more accessible or more useful to you?
Thanks. Robert or Erin, do you have a comment that you'd like to make?
I think one thing that would, from my standpoint, when I first started with the university, I didn't have many friends, but I think one thing that I think would be in our betterment of getting to know other people, and it's interesting, I've had this discussion lately with school officials the last couple of weeks, but the thing that I kind of thought was interesting in my approach to them was they said, what could we do better? What can we do to better initiate contact with you? And I had a discussion with the girl this morning, and she goes, tell them that they just need to get to know us. Like with autism, we just get to know us, ask us questions, be involved. Let us see how your autism plays into the school setting with our classes. But I think that's the biggest thing is come to know us. We are loving, we're caring. I think with autism, it's a good thing because, yeah, it's a disability, but we have special abilities. Because there's a girl that I know of in Arizona, and she goes, I think, because she teaches special education, and she goes, we do have disabilities, but really those disabilities are special abilities. And I thought that was quite interesting that she kind of turned the tables a little bit and saying that those hard times and disabilities are really not, but they're more abilities.
Yeah, I love that
So
framing of
come
it,
to
Robert.
know us. We don't bite.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of territory. So, Lori, you had a
Well, I just
closing comment? Go
I
ahead.
guess the theme of there, what I loved about that, and just something I kind of wanted to point out is, sometimes when people are not included in groups, there's intimidation factors that play into it. But there has been some research that just simply asking someone what would be helpful for them or how they could be involved or invited or welcomed in, and that's exactly what was mentioned here. So I just feel like that's a really powerful kind of thing to think about, because you're going to come across all kinds of people throughout your life, and whoever that is, if there is that intimidation factor, it does boil down to that basic humanity of like, hey, what's going to help you be a part of things, you know? So I appreciate those perspectives.
Yeah, I really resonate with that too. Often the people who develop the support systems are not the people who use them. So it's so important to include the actual consumers of the service in how that service is shaped, so that it's maximally helpful to individuals. So I wanted to, we're going to take a few more minutes and then we're going to allow you guys to ask some questions. So I wanted to sort of go back to those stats that we saw. So we know that a relatively low percentage of autistic individuals are electing to go to post-secondary education. Same with students with intellectual disability. And then we talked about those completion rates. So as college students who are successful, what can we do moving forward to encourage more high school students with disabilities to attend college? Who wants to start with this one? Robert? Grab the
I will
mic.
take on this opportunity.
Okay.
I think one of the things that we need to do, and as I discussed in a meeting the other day at the Autism Center with Lori and with Jane and with Caleb, we were discussing this problem and thinking, what can we do more as a university? And I think that I said, well, one thing I think we need to do that would be more beneficial for us is to put a couple people in the classroom of seniors in high school, like put a student who's in athletics, one who's in social work, one that is in business education, and so that the high school students can see there's different specialties at college, and there's different responsibilities, whether it's, again, researcher or social work or education. Like, the more that we can put ourselves in the classroom, especially with autistic students, it'd be great to put us more into their classrooms so we can see what they do when they're at their best. And so I think just putting us in their classrooms, that way we can resonate between each other, what we see and what we've experienced and what they experience with wanting to come to college.
All right, I love that. Aaron?
Based on my experience, at least welcome to reality, baby. Let's all face the truth that not everything in the world is all happiness and harmony, but filled with consequences as we know it. But I can't say it. It's our life. We choose to live it. We work. If we want it, we work for it. But neither of us have to be in it alone.
Hey, Aaron, before Doc speaks next, I just wanted to ask you a question from yesterday when we were talking. You had kind of said that you had like a message you wanted to make sure everyone heard today. Do you remember what that was? You wrote it down.
Let's see.
It just seems like it would
We
fit.
have a great accessibilities department.
So it was more about education for everyone. Do you remember that? No.
Vaguely.
So I remember it. You said
Then, on behalf of me, I would pass this on to Laurie.
so on behalf of Aaron, the message was everyone deserves an education.
Everyone deserves a second chance sometimes.
Truth.
yeah, laugh it up.
Doc, do you have something?
Kind of going off of what Robert said is about showing other students that they can succeed. I've been public with my autism on and off for the past couple years, which I took that risk because half the time when I tell someone I have autism, they either look at me funny, like, no you don't, or they look at me like, they start treating me different. But I like to try to show people, just even through TikTok, through just in person or through these panels, that that you can succeed, that just because it doesn't seem like the end of the road is clear, it doesn't mean if you get to the end, it's actually blocked. You can find a different path if that one's actually blocked too.
All right, thank you. And then my last question, it's sort of a twist on that, but based on your experience at UVU, what makes higher education a welcoming place for people with disabilities? Aaron, you want to start?
That nobody is alone in any situation. They can still find the light.
Thank you. Robert?
Jane, you're gonna think I'm really funny when I say this, but in my couple of years here at UVU, it was just about maybe a month and a half ago since I went to my first girls basketball game, and everyone's like, so how many games have you been to? And I'm like, I've only been at this university for a little bit, and I've been to one game, like, that's it. And my dad's like, let's make it a goal to go to as many as we can. Should we please? And I'm like, the girls one I went to was very enjoyable, and my dad's like, Well, that's what's welcoming, is just putting your homework off to go do something that you really shouldn't be doing, that you know that you, I don't know, just kind of making it a good excuse every once in a while to go do something fun and put your homework off for a little bit during a evening game.
Nobody ever does that, right? Put off what you're supposed to do something fun. Thanks, Robert.
Positive reinforcers if he's getting to the point.
Exactly.
But life
Yeah.
ain't about that.
Because, yeah, I've never put off anything to the last minute. Who does that? But the biggest thing that I liked is the fact that a lot of my peers are more relatable than I thought they were going to be. It's just the fact of a lot of challenges my peers also have to an extent. It's just knowing that I'm not the only one who struggles with them.
All right. Thank you very much, panel, for your insights and your comments. And now I'm going to sit down and you guys can field questions from our audience here. Anyone have a question for our panel?
Thanks. Have you found any successful mechanisms in coping with the stress of college?
Good question.
With coping mechanisms, the biggest one I've found is just knowing when to take a break, is knowing how to break it up into smaller bits, and just finding a path that will either stop you from overdoing it or find just enough of it where you can succeed in that day.
That's a really important life skill. That's awesome. Thank you.
So my educational coach here, she's actually here at this meeting this morning, but one of the things that I love to do when I'm absolutely stressed out about life or school or homework is I'll be at home and I'll pull out like a packet of blueberry muffins, or I'll make a angel food cake, or I'll like cook banana bread. My coach last semester was like, "So what is it going to be tonight?" And I'm like, "It's going to be a chocolate pie, I think." And Ben would say, "Okay, next week." I go on and I'd be stressed. He'd be like, "So what's it this week?" And I'm like, maybe like an apple crisp. I'm not quite sure yet. So I love to bake whenever I'm stressed. It's all about food.
Going back to Robert's your answer to your question, what's your name? Alexa. With me, it's not about food. It's about taking walks, exercise, physical. What's physical? But for me, I sometimes get tense, hot-headed, with a face full of red when I'm stressed about life and school, and there are times I just want to at least throw or break something. Well, that could be me, of course. That can be for all of us who are either have a tough time dealing with anger, but at least you find a way to cure that anger. Just close the book, log out of your screens, just end up get lost in a hobby. Grab a guitar, play video games, do whatever you want. But don't go posting something private.
Great advice from all of you. Thank you. I got to remember that. I'll tell you in private. I'll tell you what I do when I'm super stressed out, but I can't say it in front of this whole group.
You don't want to find out what I really meant by that.
We prepared beforehand that we weren't going to swear on the panel today, but we will be later.
That may or may not be my personal coping strategy. Any other questions for our panel? Yes.
Thanks. So my sister has a learning disability. She graduated from University of Utah, and something that she really struggled with there is actually getting her ADA accommodations. So I was just wondering how it is, your experience at UVU, what it's been like for you, because she really struggled. They would promise note takers, audio versions of textbooks, longer time on tests, and they would always fall short. And she really had to fight to get those accommodations. So I was just wondering what your experience at UVU was in that regard.
Well, as I see myself in your time, sometimes each time I do it, neither of the attempts ever came flowing naturally as I thought. Just takes a bunch of time of recluttering and recluttering images. Thought I can cram it all, but not. It's best that we have learning disabilities, but we don't have the brains in the bigger stuff. Not even the math or algebra or biology or whatever it is your sister wants to study, or computer coding for that matter. I'd say you have somebody probably take notes for her, and hopefully they can reconvene afterwards. Maybe back in library or at home. Robert?
My experience at UVU with the Accessibilities Office has been nothing but positive. They've been very useful making sure that, for example, like I had to really fight this semester to get my accessibilities. I had one professor that really didn't want to work with me, didn't want to help in any way, but I had to really fight with our office to make sure that they understood correctly what autism disability was and the services that I would need for the semester. But I think it's in really working with the professor. I think that's one thing that I really had to learn, is to really not really fight with the semester or with the professor, but just make your point known from the very beginning of what you need. Because as Lori said, everyone should be expected to have everyone should have the opportunity to get an education, and whether that's making sure that we're offered services makes a world of difference. But I would say to her, just to continue to work with professors, continue to fight for the rights that we have as a nation. But that's kind of what I would say to her, is just keep fighting it, because one way or the other you'll end up getting the accommodations that you need.
My experience has been pretty positive, but I learned with educational coaching that it's the best practice is always contact the professor as soon as you can before the classes start, because they technically send you out a letter, but I don't know about you, but professors get a lot of emails and they probably don't actually respond to or see half of them. But I know at least with university that they do offer note taking. I don't actually take it, but they've asked me to take it several times, which I would do if it wasn't for the fact I'm not very good at taking my own notes, so I can't help someone else take theirs.
So just a comment that I have on that. You know, one of the things that I think is a continuing barrier, even here at UVU, where we have that commitment again to educating. Oh, am I not holding it close enough? Sorry, I'm a microphone failure. But you know, a lot of university professors don't understand that accommodations are actually covered by federal law. So it's not an option if a student comes to you with their accommodations that you can say, well, yeah, I don't really think that's appropriate for this class that I'm teaching. We're required as professors to honor those accommodations. And accommodations, every college student, whether they have a disability or not, whether they have an intellectual disability or autism or a physical disability, to earn credits and to get a degree, they're responsible for mastering the same content as everyone else. So accommodations do nothing for that content load. It just levels the playing field. So I can't take notes quickly. I can get a note taker. It takes me longer to process print information. I can get access to audio textbooks or a reader for my tests. But those students are still responsible for all of the content. And accommodations, when a student has an accommodations letter, it's not optional accommodations. It's required. And I think we need to do, even at our university, which tends to be more welcoming and understanding, we still struggle with professors understanding that.
We have so much to say. It's a good thing there's a time limit. So, you know, I get the opportunity to meet with students, especially when they're first coming to the university and making that decision, you know, to come here. And wow, that can be a difficult transition. If you think about in high school, if you need accommodations or that support, usually it's the parents that are doing that advocating. And then as soon as you turn 18 and you start going to a post-secondary experience, you have to be that advocate. And I just want you to think about how hard that is to ask for help yourself, right? It takes a while as an adult to really start asking for those things that we need. And we all need different things. But so the system in general is kind of a hard system, right? Because we're working from a place where maybe there's some difficulties asking for that help in the first place or understanding what that role is. And then you're expected to go and do that on your own. So I just think that first hump is kind of a big one to begin with. And then in an ideal perfect world, you have a faculty member that is reading those emails, right? But this is a good point that Doc made, and that they are understanding that it is a law and they need to do it. And so there are really positive experiences that some of our students have had. But I also know of times where maybe a faculty member has said, okay, you've had enough. Accommodate. We're halfway through the semester. That was enough. Thank you. Or that requirement is that the person with the disability, and maybe it's in social communication, is the one that has to keep asking for something when that's like climbing the biggest mountain. So I think we have a great Office of Accessibility here. We really love that partnership. But there's certainly more that needs to be done. But that's a really good question.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Okay. Young man in the green shirt.
So, so I have an individual that I know that struggles with learning due to disabilities, and I believe that he can learn everything he needs to, but he is convinced that he cannot, no matter what. How would you say I can help him see his real potential?
That's a really good question.
I'm just going to take a swing at it, but honestly, this kind of, it's not the easiest way to do because your own self-doubt is your worst enemy for anyone. But it's just not proving, but just trying to show that others are succeeding and show that your support that I think you can succeed too.
Can I use you guys as examples?
Yes.
I think you could.
Any other comments, Robert or Aaron?
That is a really good question. I think that's something that that's what I've always come to believe in. When I first started here, I was like, I can't do it. There's so many professors are going to be hard, and it's a new experience, and I just don't feel like I'm fit for college, and I feel like I can't do it, and that I'll be singled out. But what I would say to that person is to never give up on that person, but to make sure that they feel like they can succeed no matter what. Give them a friend to encourage them, and I think that by giving them a friend, that just opens up more doors or avenues.
I think that was a good question for me too. I mean, like your so-called individual, I do have a lot of doubt, lots of times on the way. But each time I do, I have a decision to make: drop the course, probably take it next semester, or don't take it again, or you stick with it and do what you could, and pass it with the best option you could. But sometimes I wish I made the best decision, because I might need it, I might not, I could second guess. But eventually, it'll be the best you can ever have.
Thank Thank you.
Gotta learn to deal with gotta learn to deal with what you got along the way, good or bad. And there are times you can ask yourself this again.
These have been such great answers. I guess one thing I'd like to just kind of share, as we were preparing yesterday, and especially when we were really thinking about, hey, you've made it into that 14%. Like, that is an amazing accomplishment. What was that about? You know, how did that come about? And one thing we talked about there, I wish you would have all been there yesterday. That was, well, this is good, but that was good too.
Amazing conversations yesterday prepping for this.
But part of what we talked about, and I realized as everyone was talking, is there was that internal motivation to do it, right? And in scientific terms, like sometimes they refer to that as self-determination. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but we all, when we're working towards something, it's a determination that we make inside that's going to help us overcome those barriers to get there. And, you know, that's more fostered in some individuals, but components that go into it can be having friends and family and people that are important to that person that believe in them and communicate a message of, you can do this. And so as you have that friend, maybe they have heard other messages. I don't know what their life experiences has had, but sometimes it just takes one person communicating, I believe in you, to help plant that seed, and being consistent in that can really start making those differences, because self-determination is not as strong in everyone, and that can be how we all develop, but we can help foster that in others.
Yeah, and part of that self-determination is how we handle adversity, how we respond when negative things happen. I mean, pretty much everybody fails at least one class in college, or drops it before they fail it, but has some kind of a negative experience. I know when I was in grad school, I cried every day about statistics. It was terrible. It was the worst experience. But you know, we can learn from those things, and we can learn to persevere even when we have experienced failure, and that is part of that self-determination, is how we handle those negative things that come our way, those barriers, those challenges that we have. And sometimes you hear this framed as growth mindset. Have any of you heard that term, growth mindset? And again, that's something that can be taught, and we really encourage those K-12 teachers to begin working on with individuals with disabilities when they're very young, so that our college students come in with a growth mindset, and we plant that seed early on that you can do it. You can overcome any challenge that comes your way. Oh, and we are out of time. Thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciated it. And yeah. Thank you to our panel. Thank you so much, Aaron, Robert, and Doc, for sharing your knowledge with us.